Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? I think I'm going to need this microphone thing. Let me just move it closer to where I'm sitting because I thought that would be an appropriate setup for today's show. Yeah, I sat down and got ready. I mean, actually, drew breath, got ready to lean forward and turn the mute off of the microphone, and I'm like, where is that microphone? Oh, here it is. Right where I usually keep it. All right, well, it's Friday. It felt like Friday yesterday. It always feels like Friday, but boy, did it feel like Friday yesterday. And I don't know, I guess even the news cycle felt a little Friday-ish. Like after the show was done and evening had descended, crazy things began happening, and of course we're just going to have to turn our attention to those we can cover in 2 hours, and I don't know, leave the rest for later, I guess. It's been a wild couple of hours, I guess, catching up with what's been happening during what's usually the off-cycle part of the news cycle. I think just as we were exiting the show yesterday, I managed to bring you the news that Greg had sent on after his segment that Kilmar Abrego Garcia had been ordered freed by a federal judge. And, I mean, I don't think anybody really thought that was going to be the end of it per se, but man, I mean, these guys in the federal government just pursuing this guy to the ends of the earth overnight, essentially. I haven't caught up yet with all of the reporting, and we'll have to grab something and read it and use it as a basis for what's going on. But the commentary that I've seen flying around on what's going on with his case just on social media has been outlandish. I guess the best I can kind of stitch together here on the fly is I happen to just see a Blue Sky post here that was outlining just how outrageous everything is. Evan Bernick is whose post I'm looking at. Evan Bernick is an associate professor at Northern Illinois University College of Law, constitutional law, crim law, all sorts of things like that. So, qualified as any other citizen might be to comment on such things. And he's playing off of David Kurtz's continuing commentary on this case, the TPM, Talking Points Memo, editor at large, David Kurtz is, and pointing out, I guess what happened here is the judge essentially said, all right, enough. You don't have anything on this guy. There's no final removal order from an immigration court for this guy. So I'm ordering him released from custody, and I guess they'll proceed with some other portion of the case, was the thinking anyway. But yeah, David Kurtz, I guess, begins his coverage here from this morning, saying, after being released from custody yesterday, Abrego Garcia has been ordered to report to ICE at 8 a.m. today, his lawyers say, in an emergency overnight court filing trying to prevent him from being re-detained. They ordered him released, and ICE released him and it immediately said, yeah, but you have to report to our office tomorrow at 8 a.m., at which point we're going to arrest you for something else. So his lawyers went to court and said, what the hell is this? We need a temporary restraining order preventing ICE from demanding that he be there at 8 a.m., or at least from taking him into custody if he does report. He goes on then to add, a federal judge ruled Thursday morning that no order of removal for Abrego Garcia had ever existed. So therefore, look, you not only can't remove him, but you can't hold him anymore either. By Thursday evening, an immigration judge, and the thing you got to understand about immigration judges is that they are not Article 3 judges confirmed by the Senate. They are appointed to a term of years. They work directly for the Justice Department. As a matter of fact, the Justice Department, I am reminded, has been renaming their immigration judges, like the Department of Defense has become the Department of War. These are now deportation judges. So I guess there's no confusion about what's expected of you in the job. Anyway, a federal judge, one of these judges is federal, ruled, the real federal judge, the lifetime appointment Article 3 federal judge, I should say, ruled on Thursday morning, there's no order of removal for Abrego Garcia, out. By Thursday evening, an immigration judge had, as David puts it, conjured an immigration court's sua sponte order correcting Scrivener's error. Sua sponte essentially meaning on its own motion. The court says, well, nobody asked us to issue this. We just did issue it. We took judicial notice of things that were happening and said, here's an order correcting Scrivener's error, which another more terminology there. That basically being the claim that the court said X, but the person keeping the records for the court, writing down the official record, taking the transcripts, whatever, keeping the files of the court, has written it down wrong. And it's an error. And we all know what it was supposed to say. It was supposed to say this, and so we can correct, you can correct things like that. But pretending that there was an order years ago that there wasn't, and saying, well, it was Scrivener's error to not write down that there was such an order. Well, no, that's not how it. Right. That's not. I didn't mean to raise my voice so early, but there you have it. That's a new one. Abrego Garcia's lawyers tell the judge in this emergency overnight filing. It says here's a screen grab of it. A couple hours later, I guess after the release. Do I have to have this so big? A couple of hours later, approximately 7:01 p.m., an immigration judge issued a document with the heading, quote, Order of the Immigration Judge, unquote, and the subheading, Immigration Court Sua Sponte Order Correcting Scrivener's Error. This sua sponte order states that in the October 10th, 2019 order granting petitioner withholding of removal, the order of removal to El Salvador, which should have preceded the order granting him withholding of removal to El Salvador, was erroneously omitted. Let me see if I can read that again. The order of removal to El Salvador, which should have preceded the order granting him withholding of removal to El Salvador, was erroneously omitted. Then goes on to state, the immigration court now corrects that Scrivener's error and amends the written decision in this case by adding the following. The respondent is ordered removed to El Salvador based on the charge contained in the notice to appear, but the respondent's application for withholding of removal to El Salvador pursuant to the immigration regulations herein cited is granted. Okay. The order further states that these corrections are hereby issued. Nunc pro. Is it nunc pro tunc? I don't know how you pronounce this particular Latin. To the immigration court's written decision and order of October 10, 2019. Yeah, it seems like gobbledygook. And, well, unfortunately, underlying the whole thing is gobbledygook. They basically said, well, the federal government doesn't have the immigration authorities don't have a leg to stand on at this point in continuing to hold him or trying to deport him because they never issued this final order of removal for him 6 years ago when this whole thing started. And now they're saying, oh, yeah, we did. We just forgot to write it down. So, I mean, now at this point, Brown v. Board of Education, what a pain in my ass, right? Hey, everybody, it was a Scrivener's error. Actually, that case came out backwards, and there's no civil rights and no integration. Sorry. Hate to break it to you. Well, let's see. David continues by saying, now at 7 a.m. this morning, in response to the overnight filing, Judge Zinnes, remember Judge Zinnes in presiding over all of this, issued a temporary restraining order barring the Trump administration from re-detaining Abrego Garcia. Like, holy cow, you really have to do this? I guess so. How long is this document? Can we, 5 pages, but you get the idea. She's issued a temporary restraining order against taking him back into custody. That seems odd, to say the least. And then there was Evan Bernick's commentary on it, which just says, this is absolutely wild. Hey, remember 6 years ago when there was no final order for removal? Sorry about that. There is one now. This, as he points out, is not a scrivener's error. It is an outrageous farce. Total nonsense. Those words do not mean those things. Utterly lawless stuff. For the uninitiated, he says, the scrivener's error doctrine allows you to correct typos, not retroactively conjure non-existent orders into existence. And this official didn't even have jurisdiction over the case. They weren't even the scrivener. I'm just at a loss, just nakedly corrupt. It's pretty much just working at the level that we were saying. If there's a Supreme Court precedent that stands in your way, let's just say it was a scrivener's error for them to have ignored it all this time. Actually, we ruled the other way. It was a little surprising to find that was the case, but what can I tell you? That's what's happening. All right. Well, there'll be some writing on this possibly by the end of the show. It is possible. I just, we have to wait and see, I guess, because this thing happened early this morning. People are probably still drinking their coffee and trying to finish up their first round of copy for publication online. We got a lot of other things to get to, including something else that I guess involves looking back in time and reviewing the record. I guess you could say it that way. In this case, a record I established for you, which means that I don't know where it is. But I do remember it happening. Development last night, in which, and I guess I'll have to read one of the articles in order to get the actual language for it, but circulating on social media by yesterday evening was word that Donald Trump, who, you may remember is President of the United States, federal government guy, you remember, declaring that he was, as we predicted, I guess, on the show, and I did make some social media mention of it back in March, saying, yeah, I mean, I guess, and earlier than that, I think I was just restating it in March, that Donald Trump would basically eventually just say, you know what, Tina Peters, the Mesa County, Colorado clerk who is in prison for 9 years for her scheme to break into the storage facility that the county had for their voting machines and allow people to tamper with those voting machines and steal parts of them in an effort, of course, to prove Donald Trump's wild conspiracy theories about how the 2020 election was stolen from him. And she ends up in prison, rightly. But state charges, state prison, beyond Trump's reach. So everyone says, except me, of course, who said Donald Trump is not going to recognize that anybody is beyond his reach. He is going to purport to be pardoning Tina Peters eventually. First, he invented the workaround where he said, well, I will cut off federal funding to Colorado unless Colorado's governor uses his power of clemency to release her from prison and pardon her for the state crimes. And the governor showed no particular interest in doing so, rightly. And so I figured it was a matter of time that Trump would eventually say, this whole limitation thing is stupid. Why do people say that I don't have the power to pardon Tina Peters for anybody for anything ever? Why would I listen to something like that? And I guess that time is now, because last night he said, yeah, I'm pardoning her. Although I do see this morning that there's some additional detail people were, that was being bandied about, that he may have acknowledged in this message that the pardon would have to be symbolic in nature, which there's no such thing. But at least it would be a sort of a recognition that, no, this really is beyond your powers. But of course, what has been interesting is watching national news organizations respond to this with, and I mean, I criticize them for it because the answer is plain for normal people. No, you don't have the power to do this. And it's one of those everybody knows it sorts of things. But the New York Times and others have opted to treat it like, well, legal experts say he can't do this. And I appreciate what they're saying. They do say that, and they are right in saying that. But I feel like it sets things up. And in fact, even the governor of Colorado last night said, well, no, we're not going to do anything with this pardon. This doesn't have any effect as far as we're concerned. But this is an issue for the courts to settle, which is like, no, don't open that door. It's not an issue for the court. The courts will be the ones to settle it. We all know that. But just say, no, this issue is well settled. Everybody knows that the president has no power to pardon state crimes. That's been the structure of the Constitution since forever. It was their intention from the beginning. It's always been the case. It will continue to be the case. Courts will have to be the ones to say officially to you, yeah, no, that's not how this works. And they might even scream it at you.
That's not how this works!
Right. But it will be up to them to be the official guys that say, oh, here's another sound effect. Can he pardon a state crime?
No!
Right. So, okay. Courts will say that. I mean, you could frame it the way and say, well, he doesn't have this power. I know it, you know it, the American people know it. And if it takes a judge's order to prove it to you, we'll get one, because every judge will say, that is not how this works. And you could have said it that way. So there's some coverage on this. What do I have? The Washington Post version of it, and then I've got the Colorado Sun coverage of it. And I guess I'll start with the Washington Post one for the general and national view that people are being fed or were being fed yesterday. And then we'll take a look at the Colorado Sun's closer look, although Colorado Sun is another publication I guess I could do a quick check on. Do I know that one? Those of you in Colorado might. The Washington Post. Has anybody ever heard of this one? All right. Well, it might have been written by AI or Jeff Bezos or something like that, but we'll read it here. It says it was written by Derek Hawkins and Alec Dent, and I believe him. Trump asserts he has pardoned county clerk convicted in Colorado case. The impact of Trump's claim is unclear since Tina Peters was convicted in state, not federal court. And I mean, these days, I went into this with the intention of saying, no, it's not unclear. It doesn't work. That's the answer. But again, I guess you have to be sympathetic to the plight of the headline writers here in, well, what if we're all pre-wrong again? That's kind of what it comes down to. What if Trump just asserts a counterfactual and 5, or hey, for that matter, 6 Supreme Court justices say, it's confusing. It doesn't matter to us that people won't understand it, and it will upend hundreds of years of precedent or could destroy, I don't know, I'm sure it has some unintended consequences somewhere down the line. But we're going to do it anyway, and there's no logical reason for doing it. But then again, I'm not going to tell you that. I'm just going to stop the opinion here. You could do that. And I guess if you thought that they were trying to be responsible by saying, well, we don't want to end up issuing a retraction explaining how we were pre-wrong about this whole thing, so we'll leave a little wiggle room. But honestly, you could just put that there and then just say, you know what, surprising everybody, we're wrong. Or say it was a Scrivener's error. I guess you could try that. All right, well, here's the coverage from the Post. President Donald Trump said Thursday that he has pardoned Tina Peters, a former county clerk in Colorado who was convicted in state court on felony charges related to efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. That's, again, putting things mildly. If you remember the case, they were pretty emphatic, right? The sentencing judge was like, you think you're a hero. You're not a hero. You're not a patriot. You're a charlatan, and you belong in prison. You abused the trust you were given in your elected position, and it's one of the worst crimes you can do in many ways. Or let's say nonviolent crime. All right. Democrats have been relentless. Is this Trump? Oh, he wrote it in Truth Social. So, it may not really have been him, but we'll do it in his voice anyway. Democrats have been relentless in their targeting of Tina Peters, which is an amazing thing. I got to take a moment here to say, how amazing it is to be crying about being relentless of their targeting of Tina Peters immediately after covering the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case. Like, there's no case that defines relentless pursuit and targeting like the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case. And he's like, no, I meant Tina Peters. All right. They've been relentless, Democrats have, in their targeting of Tina Peters, a patriot who simply wanted to make sure that our elections were fair and honest. And, of course, there's a whole process for that, a whole body of law. And he tried 60 times to make, an effort in court to prove things and lost every single time. And she had exhausted all of her options. So she was just wanted to make sure that our elections were fair and honest by breaking and entering. Okay, and tampering with the machines. That's honest and fair. Okay, well, obviously he's insane. That's what he wrote on Truth Social, and then he follows it up with, "Today I am granting Tina a full pardon for her attempts to expose voter fraud in the rigged 2020 presidential election. It was unclear whether Trump was asserting that he has the power to free Peters from state prison. She is serving a 9-year sentence. Presidents have the power to pardon defendants convicted in federal courts, but previous presidents have not claimed that authority in a state case." That's true. They also have not claimed the ability to turn defendants into a frog who can only be redeemed by being kissed by a princess. That's another thing that presidents haven't done. Flying carpets, free pizza for everyone. These are all things that presidents so far, as I know, have never claimed. But, there's always an opportunity to do so. Did they read you the Constitution about this at any point? I really don't know about that. But I also will remind you, just another throwback, if we're now in anything goes territory and people are just like, well, experts say that this isn't really the correct interpretation, but, anything could happen, then it's time for us to revive my own favorite intentionally warped and upside down and backwards interpretation of the Constitution, but, viewed through their eyes. Hey, maybe they'll even agree. I love to bring this one up. Here's what it is. I'll just as a reminder, Trump can't pardon Tina Peters or anybody else for that matter, not because she was convicted of a state crime, although that's true too. There's another reason, though. There's a backup reason. He's been impeached, and impeached presidents can't pardon anyone. Is that right? Is that true? No, it's not the correct current interpretation of the Constitution. But I maintain that everybody has been wrong about that. And I can even point to text in the Constitution to say that I'm right, even though everyone will say, no, you're reading it wrong. But that's still 100 times better than what he's pointing to, because he's pointing to text and saying, I can do this, but the text says you can't. So, well, all right, to be completely fair and open about it, the text doesn't say you can't. The text just says, here's what you can do. And the text also says, by the way, anything we haven't said in here isn't real. It's not a power. The rest of the stuff is reserved to who? The states, right? So who can pardon state crimes? Because they weren't mentioned here. States can. I mean, that's the actual answer. But as long as we're doing anything, you'll recall perhaps that Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, starts to enumerate some of the president's powers. The president shall, for instance, be the commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States. Not the Space Force. It doesn't say Space Force. That could be a state thing. I don't know. And the militia and of the several states when called into the actual service of the United States, which is also at issue right now with his dispatching the National Guard to various states and cities to beat up immigrants or help other people beat up immigrants and keep the local people from beating up the people beating up the immigrants is really the role of the militia at this point. And then, of course, he may require the opinion in writing of the principal officer of each of the executive departments. People forget about this part, but, whatever. Upon any subject relating to the duties of their respective offices. And this is the part we were ready to talk about. He shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States. That's why everybody says, yes, you can pardon federal crimes, but not state crimes. But again, I'll read you the full ending of this thing. He shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. Now, there's a comma there, comma, except in cases of impeachment. The comma doesn't help us all that much. But, of course, the general understanding of this has been, oh, well, what that means is if a federal official is impeached, the president can't prevent an impeachment document, impeachment resolution from passing the House, or from the Senate, can't prevent the Senate from sitting in judgment of that impeachment, that indictment, and deciding to remove the officer, because it says right here, no, you can't pardon an impeachment. But of course, it is an interesting thing, because in most cases, asking, your basic American citizen who pays any attention to the news whatsoever about impeachment, they usually think about presidential impeachment. But of course, yes, you can impeach a cabinet officer and a number of other officials as well. But it's usually spoken of in the context of presidential impeachment. So of course, you would think, well, the president can't pardon his own impeachment, but it's meant to mean that he can't pardon anybody's impeachment. However, another way of reading that is my way, which I maintain you're all pretty wrong about. A president has the power to issue reprieves and pardons, except in cases of impeachment, except in the case where the president has been accused of such insane corruption and lawbreaking that he has found himself impeached by the Congress. Clearly, if you're removed from office, you don't have the power to do those reprieves anymore, but it just says impeached. He's been impeached. He's been impeached twice. Well, that would be dangerous, but that's what it says.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Coast, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, or maybe welcome back to the Donald Trump Show. It's Scrivener's error, everybody. It's really Donald Trump's show, and it seems that way sometimes. So, yeah, okay. Like I say, if you're going to go into anything goes territory, as I put it on social media, it's time to get back to an even dumber interpretation of the Constitution, which, I'd say press it. Why not? Throw it against the wall and see what sticks. It's not beyond possibility that the founders might have meant that. I mean, there is a certain logic to it. If you've impeached the president, then perhaps the power that you give him that is the most sweeping and the most absolute and the most dangerous, especially in light of a cornered animal like an impeached president, you might want to, let's say, limit his power to let himself off the hook. After all, I mean, certainly the meaning of the phrase, even as we have always interpreted it, is that the president can't override Congress's power to say, no, there's somebody that simply must be held accountable here, and you can't stop us from doing it. Now, that's But again, the quote unquote real and understood interpretation here is, well, this isn't even a judicial proceeding. So it isn't a pardon and reprieve can't be granted in cases of impeachment because it's a non-judicial proceeding. It's just outside of your purview. That's one of the limitations. But it was probably understood at the time, well, who's going to end up getting impeached here? Probably the president, although they had a broader understanding of impeachment then, which, by the way, at that point, they hadn't settled whether or not you could impeach a member of Congress, which it's been the interpretation since the late 18th century when they actually tried this at some point. But the Congress essentially decided for itself, no, impeachment isn't a thing for members of Congress because we already have. I mean, how do you impeach somebody? Right, you impeach them in the House and then try them in the Senate, and the Senate, if by 2/3 vote convicts the person, then they can be expelled from office and barred from holding federal office thereafter, right? So since the threshold is the same, if 2/3 of the Senate says you're out of the Senate, then you're out of the Senate anyway, like during a regular expulsion thing, that comes under Article 1 powers, that each house shall be the judge of, whether of who can sit as a member of the House and their elections and whether or not they need to be expelled for bad behavior or whatever else. So as long as the threshold is the same, that's fine. And also, I guess they figured, well, there's probably no real reason why, for instance, if you wanted to expel a senator, if each house reserves to itself, or has reserved for it by the Constitution, the right to make this decision for itself, then why should you need a House decision to indict, impeach a senator? Like the Senate shouldn't need the House's permission to begin a trial for a senator. So the impeachment process doesn't make any sense for them. And since they already have an alternative that's no more difficult, in fact, it's less difficult, you might argue, than impeachment, they decided early on that impeachment wasn't a proper method of imposing accountability on members of Congress. It was for members of the executive branch and the judicial branch. It's a check on the judicial, too. You would have to impeach in order to remove a federal judge from office. Remember that. I mean, I don't think anybody has forgotten that. And that's what most impeachment cases in history have actually been about. But don't forget it, because we're going to need it at some point in the near future. I hope it's near anyway. But on the other hand, right, so it's not beyond the realm of possibility that the founders could have been saying, well, sure, for the most part, if you're worried about impeachment, you're probably talking about a presidential impeachment. Obviously, he should not be able to pardon that, because you can't pardon yourself, which will also become relevant because that has been widely assumed to be the case as well. But of late, the discussion has been, well, it doesn't say anywhere that the president can't pardon himself. It doesn't even say that he can't pardon himself or others in furtherance of a criminal conspiracy. It doesn't say that in there. It was sort of assumed that, well, we're going to follow that general common law precept, right? We don't know. We don't know for how long anyway. Okay. Back to the Washington Post article about what's going on here in Colorado. Peters' conviction. I skipped a brief paragraph here. Peters was accused of sneaking Conan Hayes, just to remind you who's, the names of the weirdos involved here, a purported computer expert, that is disputed, into her office in 2021 using someone else's security badge so that he could copy Dominion voting systems hard drives. Again, the charge of the county clerk, of course, is safeguarding all of this equipment. We said the judge called her a charlatan and said you abused your office. You were supposed to safeguard the safekeeping of these machines, and instead you let somebody in to break them up, steal them, and tamper with them. That's a mistake. You should not have done that. You were in trouble. How do we know? Well, we know this much. The county had put together a system whereby no one would be allowed access to the machines except by a probably fairly difficult to come by security badge. That is to say, they built in a system such that random people who say they are computer experts, no matter whether they really are or aren't computer experts, if they're not members of the staff who have been granted access by law to these machines, they're not supposed to be in there. We have it controlled with security badges as proof of our interest in securing these things. And Tina Peters said, well, yes, you need to have a security badge to get in, and that's supposed to keep random riffraff out. But what if I illegally give someone else's security badge to this guy, and they can fool the computer into thinking that they're the other person so that they let them in? Well, that would be against the law. And that's why she's in trouble. It's really pretty basic. But, but I was a patriot when I did it. Oh, I see. Right. All right. So she gave this person, Conan Hayes, someone else's security badge so he could copy Dominion voting system's hard drives. She was convicted of charges including attempting to influence a public servant and conspiracy to commit criminal impersonation. I gave you the other person's badge. That's criminal impersonation. Peters' conviction and imprisonment in Colorado have become a major cause among some MAGA influencers, really not very many of them, but a few, and activists who have demanded for months that the administration take action to free her. Her lawyer and other supporters claim Dominion was involved in a conspiracy to rig the 2020 election. Of course, they claim that. They've tried several times to prove that. They've lost. Dominion has sued the people who said that Dominion tried to do that and won. There's really, no lack of proof that these people are insane or unable to make their case in court anyway, and as a result, she's in prison. In August, Trump threatened harsh measures, that's a quote, harsh measures, if Peters was not released from prison. He also ordered the Justice Department to, quote, take all necessary action to help secure the release of Peters earlier this year. Last month, the Federal Bureau of Prisons wrote to Colorado officials asking that they transfer Peters to federal custody, a request that Governor Jared Polis, a Democrat, of course, rejected. And he, of course, rejected it. And also, of course, he's a Democrat. You know that. No president has jurisdiction over state law, nor the power to pardon a person for state convictions, Polis said in a statement late Thursday. Then he should have just stopped. But instead, he added, this is a matter for the courts to decide, and we will abide by court orders. No. If you get a crazy federal judge to say, yeah, the interpretation of everything is upside down, I think what you really need to say there is, I'm not trying to start a fight by saying, well, we're not going to abide by court orders. But I am saying this. We're not abiding by this one because we're appealing it, and we're asking for a temporary restraining order from maybe another judge, or we'll ask this judge, why not, even though this judge is obviously crazy. But we're asking everybody for a temporary restraining order preventing us from having to transfer her into federal custody pending what should be a 5-second appeal to tell you, no, this judge is actually crazy. You could still claim you were following court orders at the time because, the appeal is part of the process, but just don't open a door. It was a fine statement to just leave it where it was, that the president has no power to do this, and thank you, good night. Peters' lawyer, who confusingly enough is named Peter, but Peter Tickton, I don't know, that's a weird name anyway, but okay. Peters' lawyer, Peter Tickton, told the Washington Post that he believed Peters should be released, while courts weigh the legality of Trump's attempted pardon. Well, he's paid to believe that. You don't keep someone in prison when you don't know if she belongs in prison or not, Tickton said. It could be a year of litigation. You have to let her out. No. Once again, that is not how this works. And there are hundreds, thousands of people who could say, hey, you don't know if I belong in prison. I should be let out pending the decision. Literally everybody says that. It was unclear Thursday what practical effect, if any, the White House thinks Trump's actions will have in Peters' case. When reached, the White House declined to comment on the pardon. The Justice Department did not respond to a request for comment. I guess we should look and see what Liz Oyer has to say about it if she's already made a video about it. Might not have happened yet. The Constitution gives the president the power. We read it already. Thanks a lot, Washington Post. Where you been? The Constitution, in paragraph 95 here, the Constitution gives the president the power, quote, to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States. And they stopped there. Interestingly enough, they didn't want to open my can of worms. Didn't dare do it, did you? All right. The Supreme Court has interpreted that language as referring to federal crimes, not those charged by states. Offenses against the United States. Well, of course, and if you're charged with a federal crime, right? How do they style the case? Let's say it is. We're going to say it's Mighty OCD here. Why not? I mean, he didn't post today about the show beginning, so I say he's under federal indictment for that. Let's say, and when we bring the case against him, it is the people of the United States of America versus Mighty OCD. They'd probably even use the real name on that one, but just for fun, we'll say not. Look, they can put any name they want on there. We've seen the United States sue cans of tomato paste. It's true. Anyway, and they'll, by the way, you'll see that again. They'll likely end up suing the oil tanker, the skipper, which is hilarious, at some point to try to figure out what to do with the boat itself and then all the oil on it. How will they dispose of these seized assets? So it is kind of funny. There'll be a USV skipper. I hope they'd say the skipper. Yeah, and of course I'm setting that already to the Gilligan's Island music in my head. Anyway, it's interesting for them to put it this way. The Constitution happens to give them the power to pardon offenses against the United States, meaning not the state's crimes. And they don't go through all the logic that we already have, right? Offenses against the United States, that's how you charge a federal crime, an offense against the United States. A state crime, Tina Peters was Colorado v. Peters. And I guess, the Stephen Millers of the world and the people pushing stuff like this would say, well, it says you can pardon offenses against the United States. Colorado is one of the United States. You see? Yeah, but no. That's not who the party in court was. It's not like that is not how this works, but they'll just say that it is. And, we've gone through the logic of no, it isn't. It says one of the things that it does say in the Constitution, and I think everybody remembers where, right? A 10th Amendment. We got to go look it up so we can read you the exact words. Why not? The 10th Amendment is a weird one, but the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited to it by the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. It's always a bit ambiguous when they interpret this thing, but if it's not, if the power isn't delegated by the Constitution, that is to say, granting reprieves and pardons for offenses against the individual states, then that power, pardoning and reprieving, is reserved to those states. And they can choose how they grant that pardon power. The governor or somebody else might be delegated that power, but not the president. Although I guess they could opt to give it to the president. None of them have, though. In a lengthy letter to Trump this month, however, Tickton, the lawyer, disputed that traditional understanding. And of course, as you heard on today's show, no one's lawyer, disputed the traditional understanding of whether or not a president who's been impeached can issue any pardons at all. Wouldn't you like to revoke all the pardons that he's done since his first impeachment in 2019? You should want to. Well, here's what Tickton writes. The issue which needs to be answered, whether our founders understood or intended, there's a word missing here, is. The issue which needs to be answered is, and it isn't, but he would want to have said is, whether our founders understood or intended when they wrote that the president had the power to pardon offenses against the United States if it meant the states or only the federal government. Did they mean the one central authority, or did they mean the plural, meaning the states which were united? He wrote, I don't know the answer to that, but while you're asking questions, did the founders mean to preclude an impeached president from issuing pardons? I don't know, but it does say that. Whereas in your case, it does not say that. Well, and by the way, the founders, of course, when they referred to the United States, they very frequently referred to the states in Congress assembled or what have you, but that it wasn't a matter of encompassing all of the individual states. It was a collection of sovereign states governed by a federal government, and the offenses against the United States was the entity, the United States, not the constituent states of that union. But Tickton asks whether that could possibly be the case. The whole writing of the Constitution was supposed to settle that issue, but, whatever. Maybe there's a question. Tickton conceded that the claim that the president could pardon people for state crimes, quote, has never been raised in any court, and the reason is everyone said no. But said Trump should assert that authority in Peters' case because of how important it is to be able to break into voting machines, I guess. The founders obviously wanted people to be able to tinker with election results. Tickton said he had recently spoken with officials of the Department of Justice and the White House about Peters' case, but not the president himself. He said he had sought at least to move Peters into a minimum security federal prison camp in West Virginia, where she would have dormitory-style housing and would not be incarcerated with violent offenders. It's not uncommon for state prisoners to be moved to the federal system, as it turns out, allegedly, here it is said, especially in cases where they're serving as a witness in a federal prosecution, which she isn't. Once there, they must still serve out their sentences. I guess what the real issue is why doesn't Colorado have more commodious prison accommodations for her if she actually deserves that. I mean, I don't think she does. This was a huge crime, but whatever. I can't see any good basis for moving her to West Virginia, though. Although, maybe West Virginia, maybe you deserve it. All the criminals should be put there, and then they all break out because it's a minimum security prison, and then you'll be sad that you have this prison. Anyway, she's from Colorado. I don't know why her family would want. Well, maybe I do. Like, oh my God, Your Honor, she wants to be released to come to Thanksgiving dinner. Please put her in West Virginia so that this can't happen. All right. I was interested in the Colorado Sun version of this, but I wanted to look up what is the Colorado Sun. The Colorado Sun is an online news outlet based in Denver, Colorado, and because everything's opening up new things, you got to check on who's who. It launched in September 10th, 2018. It's a while ago now, to provide long-form, in-depth coverage of news and from all around Colorado. Started within 2 years from funding, from blockchain venture capitalists, at Civil, and from a Kickstarter campaign. That's nice. The operation is now funded by reader support. Again, nice. Memberships, sponsorships, grant revenue. The Sun is an associate member of the Associated Press. I mean, isn't everybody? It's Associated Press. What other kinds of members are there? I don't know. But 10 former employees of the Denver Post, which I definitely know, started the Colorado Sun in response to multiple layoffs following acquisition of the Post by the hedge fund Alden Global Capital. None of the founders of the Sun were laid off from the Post. They left of their own volition. So that gives you some idea maybe where they're coming from. No obvious blinking red lights except that they got funded by a hedge fund somewhere. So there you go. I don't know. Take it for what it's worth. It's not as much of a red light for me as the other one from yesterday was. So I'll proceed just to get a more local angle here and see if there's any other information to glean from this. Donald Trump says he's pardoned Tina Peters. That doesn't affect her state conviction. That's the headline. It doesn't. Experts say it. Okay. We didn't bother putting that in there. We just said, here's what they said. Peters, the former clerk in Mesa County, was sentenced to 9 years in prison for orchestrating a breach of her county's election system. Well put again. Thank you. Because she was convicted in state court, only Governor Jared Polis can pardon her in this case, says Jesse Paul, or at least say the headline writers on Jesse Paul's article. All right. President Donald Trump has announced on social media, and again, this too is of importance. It's on social media, but is there anything on the White House website? I don't know. I haven't had time to go look, but it would be interesting to see. Probably. President Donald Trump announced on social media Thursday night that he's pardoned former Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters, a move that does nothing to affect her state conviction and 9-year sentence in state prison. Thank you. I could just leave now. Peters, a Republican and former clerk of Mesa County, was convicted of orchestrating a breach of her own county's election system in 2021. Her case was tried in state court. She was convicted by a jury of her peers in Mesa County. Her sentence was handed down by a state judge. Only Governor Jared Polis can pardon her in the case or commute her sentence. Polis has given no indication he plans to pardon Peters or reduce her sentence. One of the most basic principles of our Constitution is that states have independent sovereignty and manage our own criminal justice systems without interference from the federal government. Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser said in a written statement, "The idea that a president could pardon someone tried and convicted in a state court has no precedent in American law, would be an outrageous departure from what our Constitution requires, and will not hold up." Nevertheless, Trump posted on his Truth Social site Thursday that Peters is a patriot who simply wanted to make sure that our elections were fair and honest. Tina is sitting in a Colorado prison for the, quote, crime of demanding honest elections, Trump posted. Today, I am granting Tina a full pardon for her attempts to expose voter fraud in the rigged 2020 presidential election. Trump won handily in Mesa County in 2020. Peters' breach of her county's election system in search of election fraud, which involved sneaking an unauthorized person into a sensitive election system update, didn't reveal anything wrong with Colorado's voting system that would have altered the results of any elections. So, she basically failed in her mission regardless. Peters, now 70, was sentenced in October of 2024. She's being held at the La Vista Correctional Facility in Pueblo. If you want to visit, bring her a file and a cake or something like that. A federal judge in Colorado recently denied Peters' request to be released pending an appeal. So get the effing F out of here. All right, that's the local angle on it. It was helpful just to hear things stated correctly so that in Colorado they're reading the news from a less ridiculous perspective, I guess. All right, let's see. Some other fun things to share with you. There are many. Let's see. News also from the courts. NBC News reporting yesterday. Let me open it up and bring it up. Justice Department again fails, to indict New York Attorney General Letitia James. This is not a late breaking or, not my arriving at an earlier broken news story late. This is news of their third attempt to indict James. They indicted her on the first one. I don't know how they got a grand jury to agree to the first one, but they did. And then, of course, the whole case fell apart because Lindsay Halligan isn't the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. She's not the acting. She's not the interim. She's nothing. She's never been legally appointed. And she was the only one that signed the indictment. And so that, the case fell apart on that basis. All right. But since the case was dismissed without prejudice, we have the right to try again. So they convened a second grand jury and said, well, let's indict her again. And this time I'll have somebody else sign the indictment besides Lindsay Halligan. Who, by the way, Lindsay Halligan and Alina Habba both, I don't think either of them have actually left the building. We have a case that, in case you're wondering how this Tina Peters thing is going to go, or a Abrego Garcia thing is going to go, and having lost in the courts again, they're still not going to give up. Alina Habba, it was ruled the other day, as we've mentioned, no, you are not the U.S. attorney. You're not the acting U.S. attorney. You're nothing. Get out of here. Except they left out the get out of here part. What's going on here is that they're basically saying, yeah, I'm sorry, no, your appointment was illegal. And they're saying, yeah, and you're the Department of Justice. Yeah, and so, in the interest of justice, if you're not the U.S. attorney, you can't serve as U.S. attorney anymore. Yeah, and the part that the courts keep just, for whatever reason, declining to say is, well, my order is leave this building, never come back, and you're in contempt of court if you tell anybody that you're the U.S. attorney or the acting U.S. attorney or the interim U.S. attorney or the special U.S. attorney. You're not. If you say that, it's fraud and you'll be arrested. You'll be arrested and tried for the fraud. Then we have to have a trial about whether or not it's fraud. But in the meantime, you will be arrested for contempt of court. But nobody's willing to say that. Anyway, they convened a second federal grand jury. There was one sitting anyway. And there in the Eastern District of Virginia, they said, okay, well, sure, Lindsay Halligan isn't the U.S. attorney or any kind of attorney in Eastern District of Virginia or anywhere else. But, Letitia James still did this huge crime, right? No, says the second grand jury. She didn't. So what was the response to that? Damn it. We can't get things right around here. All right, well, let's go get Adam Schiff or something. Nope. The answer, like in the Abrego Garcia case, like in the Tina Peters case, like in every other case, let's just try it again. They went to a third grand jury. Well, maybe you'll ignore what happened with the first one being dismissed. Maybe you'll ignore what happened with the second one, no bill being returned, no bill of indictment being returned. What do you say? And they said, again, third grand jury. No, still, we say this is not a crime we're going to allow you to indict her with. No, sorry, goodbye. The Justice Department has tried and failed once again to secure a new indictment against James in Norfolk, Virginia. Just quickly, Ryan J. Riley, Michael Koznar, Gary Grumbach, and Alexandra Bacalao had this to say. A federal grand jury here in Alexandria has refused to indict New York Attorney General Letitia James on Thursday. One federal law enforcement source told another person familiar with the matter, who I guess then told NBC News. He told me that he saw Ferris at 31 Flavors last night, and there was no bill. I don't know how this got to them. But anyway, it seems to be true. This was the Justice Department's third attempt to prosecute James following a months-long pressure campaign from President Donald Trump. Now we'll find out whether there's a federal three strikes law. Not against defendants, but against prosecutors. Look, if you try and indict this person 3 times and fail every time, I'm sorry, you're finished? Well, they will never settle for that. They get 100 tries. Sure. All right, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think we'll just stop. I mean, I think we know the Letitia James case inside and out, and so do the federal grand juries apparently. So I just want to put that on the record. Third time, not a charm, but rather another failure. And let's see. I'm sort of curious to see whether there's any statement given and cited in here, like what will the Justice Department do now? And I guess not. They must have asked and just gotten no comment. And, so therefore not seeing it. But there you go. Here we go. The Justice Department did not immediately respond to a request for comment. So, will they try a fourth? We don't know. But by the way, all indications are that sure, why not? It doesn't say anywhere in the Constitution that we can't. And it might not. But I will say this, it's not going to look good for the government's case in defending against motions to dismiss or further, if she sues for malicious prosecution, it's going to look awfully dumb for them to stand there and say, I don't know why we tried 4 different grand juries and didn't get anywhere, but we totally will be trying a 5th. But that's not, targeted malicious prosecution. And, it's very likely that a judge and a jury would say, actually, it is. It's the very definition of it. And we find for the plaintiff in this. And at which point Donald Trump will say, I ordered the Treasury not to pay her. And then we'll see where we go from there. Okay. That's kind of where we are, just generally speaking. Let me see what else we have to bring up, and I'm trying to see whether we're going to stay in the courts or it's time to move on to a couple other things. Maybe it's a good way to segue on to related items, but Yeah, all right. Well, there's a couple. There's one more court-related item, but that doesn't really fit into the segue I was thinking of here. But then again, neither does this one. So we'll just throw them both in there. News from Politico just the other day, and again, here we might not have to read through the whole article. We just get the gist of things. Maybe just the headline does it. Trump asserts executive privilege to thwart January 6th lawsuit. The White House said records sought in the Capitol riot litigation are, quote, clearly constitutionally protected. We don't know how clear anything is about the Constitution, at least to these guys. Josh Gerstein, Kyle Cheney reported it back on December 3rd, so it's aging quickly, and I wanted to get it on the record. It has to do with this. Trump has asserted executive privilege, it's there, to prevent courtroom adversaries from accessing evidence in a long-running lawsuit that accuses him, believe it or not, of stoking violence at the Capitol on, you know the date, January 6, 2021. The Justice Department disclosed Trump's secrecy claim on Wednesday. That would have been last week, I assume, in a hearing related to that 5-year-old lawsuit brought by police officers injured while attempting to repel the violent mob that day. Just to give you an idea of what the setting of this case is. The officers say Trump's incendiary remarks to a crowd of supporters and his direction that they march on the Capitol, which, by the way, is sedition. I mean, it is, fueled the riot that nearly derailed the transfer of power from Trump to Joe Biden and left 140 officers injured. You know what's sedition because I've read you the statute that says so. Whosoever sets on foot a rebellion, right? Well, he set him on foot. It's almost like he tried to violate this. Trump's decision to assert privilege adds to a concerted push to rewrite the story of his bid to subvert the 2020 election. Trump pardoned and ended the criminal cases of more than 1,500 people charged for their role in January 6th, and last month he issued a sweeping pardon for prominent allies who faced legal scrutiny for their part in the effort. In recent months, Trump has routinely promoted false and inflammatory claims that the FBI intentionally ignited mayhem at the Capitol. It's unclear precisely which records Trump is attempting to keep out of the hands of the plaintiffs of the January 6th lawsuit. However, a White House spokesperson confirmed Wednesday that the president has decided to fight disclosure of some material subpoenaed from the National Archives and Records Administration last year. This guy has no record to be disputing what the National Archives has to say about what gets archived and who gets what, because he's already fought them illegally and should have been charged criminally for it, but he hasn't been. Or he was, but he hasn't been tried for it because he's the president now. The president asserted executive privilege over the discovery request in this case because the overly broad request demanded documents that were either presidential communications or communications among the president's staff that are clearly constitutionally protected from discovery, unless, of course, they were in furtherance of a criminal conspiracy, which it would have been nice to have had a conviction on earlier, faster, might have prevented this disaster from happening. But anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. I don't think we have details about what it is that Trump thinks he's blocking, whether it's worthwhile or not. But he's, once again using his perch to interfere in the administration of justice in this. And I guess no different from any of the other ones, but just another one, another straw to add on top of this flattened camel whose back broke 6 years ago. Anyway, all right. So now you know that's happening. It's a moving part in all of this, and I wanted to put it on the record. As I said, it was getting past its prime. There's other court-related one-offs, I guess, here. What's the one I wanted to add here? I guess this moves out of the realm of the courts and back into, application of the law. You've probably heard, and not because we mentioned it on the show, but because it's mentioned everywhere else, but it's one of the other stories we haven't gotten a chance to cover yet. I don't know whether we've seen this thing issued or not. Is it an executive order? Is it something he wants to do through the regulatory process? But immigration officials are now asserting, and again, I don't know whether they finalized this thing or whether it's a proposed order. I think we're at the proposed order stage, but that could happen at any time because Trump issues orders left and right, saying that anybody coming into the country, I think they're beginning with H-1B visas, but they're in preparation, I think, for the World Cup, later on, I guess, the Olympics, and just in general, they're saying now that if you are coming into the country as a visitor with a visa, without a visa even, as a matter of fact, but now they'll be requiring visas from almost everybody, all those waivers of people from countries that are closely allied with the United States. Now we're no longer closely allied with anybody but Russia, so all that's out the window. But now you have to submit what? It is proposed 5 years. They essentially can search your social media on the way in, like right at customs, I guess, or in the application for your visa in the first place. You have to turn over your social media sign-ins, and they can scan it for, well, they don't say what, but they'll be looking for anti-Trump statements or anti-U.S. statements or anything of the sort, anything they can use to keep you out because you're foreign and they don't like you, unless, of course, you're foreign and they do like you because you're a right-wing lunatic leader from your country. Anyway, so 5 years of social media they'll search, although why stop at 5 for that matter? And they want submission of a DNA sample. Like, it's hugely intrusive and hugely un-American, except that's what American is now. But in addition, I wanted to add this news being reported by Zetio. What? No effing Zetio now? No, here it is. Okay. Zetio. Scoop. It's a scoop of ZDO. Delicious. From Prem Thakur and Aswan Subsang. The Trump administration is now preparing to revoke visas of critics of Elon Musk's Twitter as well. So it's not just the case that they're looking to deny you a visa coming in if you have criticized President Trump or the United States or someone they like, but in addition, someone they don't like, Elon Musk and Twitter. What is that about? I am a little bit curious about this, by the way. Does Elon Musk, I don't know whether he's had a hand in this or not, approves of it or not. I guess initially he probably would, although it will probably have the effect of prompting most of the rest of the world to delete Twitter from their phones, which would be, I assume, bad for his business model. But since his business model is not really actually making revenue from Twitter, maybe it doesn't affect him. The subheader here is that Trump officials are considering revoking the visas of former European Union Commissioner Thierry Breton and Imran Ahmed of the Center for Countering Digital Hate, because, of course, they're pro-digital hate. And so there are two specific cases they have in mind, but then this would be broadly applicable to everyone else, too, because of the logic of the law. Remember? Donald Trump's administration is in high-level talks, that is to say they're all very high when they're talking, to revoke the visas of 2 European green card holders, according to the documentation seen by Zetio. Both are prominent critics of Twitter, also known as X, they helpfully note, the social media site owned by on-again, off-again Trump pal Elon Musk. Per a draft for an action memo outlining options for Secretary of State Marco Rubio, so that's the stage we're at, the administration is weighing a move to revoke the visas of former European Union Commissioner Thierry Breton and Imran Ahmed, CEO and founder of the Center for Countering Digital Hate. The move would mark one of the administration's first attempts to revoke the visas of people they deem to be engaging in the, quote, censorship of Americans. You see how this works? We're anti-censorship. We're for free speech. These people don't like hate speech. We love hate speech. Plus, it's free speech in order to be able to have hate speech. So what we have to do in order to allow people to have hate speech is to say we're so into free speech that we're kicking out people who want to censor speech, but our kicking them out isn't censoring speech. It's opening it up for more hate speech or nice speech, maybe, possibly. But, it's the tolerance paradox at work, essentially. Our censorship of them is good because we say we're censoring the censors. You see? Now, that's what we say. That's not what they say, but that's what we say. What they say is censored, and you can't hear it because of our anti-censorship stance. The move would mark one of the administration's first attempts to revoke the visas of people they deemed to be engaging in censorship of Americans. Just last week, the State Department reportedly directed officials to, ready for this one, screen out applicants for skilled worker visas who have previously worked to combat online misinformation and disinformation. It's not just that we search your social media in order to determine whether or not to let you into the country. It's also, whether you've said anything about Trump or the United States at all, if you consider yourself to have been doing work in countering online misinformation, you're not allowed in the country. Wow, that's broad, to say the least. The visa revocation plans, which are being done in the name of free speech, come after the administration actively stifled the speech of foreign students across the United States, detaining some over their, of course, speech against Israel's U.S.-backed genocide in Palestine. That's the ZDO line on how that goes. The administration indicated it may also soon demand that visiting tourists submit 5 years' worth of social media posts before entering the country. Which, by the way, I like that formulation of it because it virtually guarantees that almost nothing will be found, because really, you're going to have federal workers are going to review 5 years of submitted social media posts before issuing a visa. I guess what will end up happening is they'll just say, well, there's no visas being issued for anyone because we haven't read the 5 years worth of posts, or you haven't submitted them, or how do we know that you've submitted all of them, or what? So anyone that they want to grind to a halt, they can grind to a halt, and anyone they want to waive, they can waive, I guess. The draft memo is meant to provide options for Rubio to respond to a $140 million fine that the European Union levied against Twitter for breaches of the Digital Services Act surrounding transparency. In other words, Twitter is in trouble with European regulators, but now we have a national security strategy that says we hate Europe. And just to intervene on behalf of Elon Musk here, you've been fined $140 million, which, by the way, is pocket change for Elon Musk. But why pay it if you don't have to? And will you have to if the United States intervenes on your behalf and says we will instead punish? I mean, it's not really instead, but we'll also punish the European Union and see if we can talk them out of finding you the $140 million. And if we can't, then the price for continuing to insist that they're going to fine Elon is nobody's allowed into the country. I don't know whether other countries are going to say, oh no, that's bad. We'll do anything to get people allowed into the United States again, or whether they'll just say, all right, don't go to the U.S. Sorry. I mean, I assume that's the answer to all of that. All right, let's see. Many other things here on our radar, including, let's say this. We can't read all the way through this thing, but this would be good weekend reading. Surprising no one, I guess, given the record of the Trump DOJ in just about every one of the high-profile cases they're bringing. ProPublica publishes today the story of Peter Elkind and Catherine Mangan. Peter Elkind is from ProPublica. Catherine Mangan, M-A-N-G-A-N, works with the Chronicle of Higher Education. You know how ProPublica works. They very often team up with other publications. And in this case, they've done so for this story, The Shakedown. That sounds very dramatic, but okay, I'll skip the music this time. The Shakedown is what? It's Trump's DOJ has pressured lawyers to, quote, find, that's familiar sounding, find evidence that UCLA had illegally tolerated anti-Semitism. UCLA being one of several universities targeted by the Trump DOJK, with and accused of fostering or allowing an atmosphere of anti-Semitism on campus by allowing people to protest the war in Gaza or protest the lack of a Palestinian state in general and Israel's role in that, and as you know how the bootstrapping goes. Well, it's counter to a position that Israel officially has taken, and so therefore doing so is anti-Semitism, right? A ridiculous charge to begin with, but even worse is that it's actually, in most cases, very difficult to muster any proof that the universities are fostering this atmosphere of anti-Semitism. At most, they're tolerating protest, and it's highly questionable whether or not any of the protest has anything to do with anti-Semitism. In some cases, it's pretty obvious and plain and blatant on behalf of some of the protesters. That's true. But is allowing, free speech on a university campus the same thing as fostering an atmosphere of anti-Semitism? Well, that's been more difficult to prove. So Trump's Department of Justice, which is usually into evidence and proof, has pressured its lawyers, to find evidence that specific colleges and universities are in fact doing this. Just as at one point Donald Trump called Brad Raffensperger in Georgia and asked him to find 11,000 plus votes in Georgia so that he could claim to have won it. Things like that. All right. Well, it's a very lengthy article, but a very important one, and I recommend it to you for over the weekend reading, just to give you a taste of how they artfully open the piece here. On the morning of Thursday, July 31st, James B. Milliken was enjoying a round of golf. Wow, that should be a crime to interrupt a round of golf. At the remote Sand Hills Club in western Nebraska when his cell phone buzzed. How is this happening? Milliken was still days away from taking the helm of the sprawling University of California system, but his new office was on the line with disturbing news. The Trump administration was freezing hundreds of millions of dollars of research funding at the University of California, Los Angeles, UC's biggest campus. Milliken quickly packed up and made the 5-hour drive to Denver to catch the next flight to California. Ordinarily, you'd think that high-powered movers and shakers like this would run to the private jet nearby and fly them back, but no, he's not wasting I guess he wasn't on the job then. So he didn't have anybody to hand the bill to. Maybe now that he's working for the UC system, the jet will be there. I don't know. Anyway, he landed on the front line in one of the most confounding cultural battles waged by the Trump administration. The giant freeze was the latest salvo in the administration's broader campaign against elite universities, which it has pilloried as purveyors of anti-Semitism and woke indoctrination. Over the next 4 months, the Justice Department targeted UCLA with its full playbook for bringing colleges to heel, threatening it with multiple discrimination lawsuits, demanding more than $1 billion in fines, and pressing for a raft of changes to the conservative wish list for overhauling higher education. You know that general background story. So they look into this one in depth. It's an awfully long article, might make for great weekend reading, but I have other things to bring to your attention, and some of them are rather amazing, and now I have to scroll to try and find the articles that lay it out, and now I'm starting to wonder, are they even here? This is, maybe I didn't park this one somehow overnight. I might, or maybe I've missed the button and thought I parked it, but now I got to go over to Blue Sky to scroll and try and find this thing. But Indiana, the continuing saga of Indiana redistricting took another weird turn. Here we are. I think this one will do. We'll start with Noah Berlatsky's Blue Sky post about this. Has it not been written up? Maybe at the time that I packed it in for the night, it probably hadn't been published yet. But the story is, let's go here. Well, Noah Berlatsky is reacting to a post from John Bisignano. John Bisignano is the president of DemocraticRedistricting.com. Okay, I'm not familiar, but he says this should be the biggest story in the country right now. That's a familiar phrase. A lot of people think their story should be the biggest story in the country right now. And it's got a legit claim to it. It's not the biggest story so far on this show, but it's hard to tell what the biggest story on this show is. This should be the biggest story in the country right now. The sitting U.S. president was extorting state lawmakers from his own party by threatening to withhold public money if they didn't, this happens all the time, right? If they didn't do what? Gerrymander for him. I don't know how else to say it. He is pointing now to the post on Twitter, screenshotted here from Adam Wren. Wow, the lieutenant governor in Indiana said the Trump administration did threaten federal funding. He's referring to Micah Beckwith's tweet that says the Trump administration was very clear about this. They told many lawmakers, and I guess, is Micah Beckwith the lieutenant governor there? Is that who that is? I guess I better look that up, just so I know who I'm talking about here. Yeah, lieutenant governor of Indiana. So, he's in a position to know what was going on. Micah Beckwith says the Trump administration was very clear about this. They told many lawmakers, cabinet members, and the governor and I that this would happen. The Indiana Senate made it clear to the Trump administration today that they do not want to be partners in something. And show more, that would entail going to Twitter to find it. But again, the allegation is that the Trump administration said, you're wavering there. And the Indiana State Senate appears to be unwilling to give me the gerrymander I want, the 10-0 Republican gerrymander of Indiana. Once again, a 58 or so % Republican voting state. It's still in the 50s. It's pretty overwhelmingly Republican, it feels like. But, at least 60-40. So if you've got 10 seats, that's 6 Republican seats, 4 Democratic seats. If you're being fair, which they're not, they want it to be 10-0. All right. Well, not all right. And now they say, if you don't do what we're going to do, Trump is now threatening the whole state of Indiana. Indiana, I'm going to cut off all your federal funding. Well, that is extortion. That is unconstitutional. And as Noah Berlatsky puts it, this right here, this is one of the absolutely most lawless, brazenly unconstitutional, impeachable offenses ever committed by any president, certainly any president other than Trump, in the history of our country. Because, of course, there are 2 arguably more unconstitutional and unlawful actions taken by a president of this country, and both of them are his. Unilaterally withholding congressionally approved aid to Ukraine in the hopes that they would lose their war to Russia, which is like treason. And if you don't like that as an option for treason, how about fomenting insurrection against the United States on January 6th? That certainly rises to the level. Yes? No? Okay. Well, we'll continue on. Noah says, this is an open and shut case, and it's a case which targeted Republicans. And I guess that's supposed to be the difference here. Even Republicans might sign on to a case here or an impeachment against Trump here because now they're attacking Republicans. Well, they've always been attacking Republicans. There are Republicans who have resigned or given up and declined to run for re-election since 2020 because they can't stand being in government where they're powerless and they keep being threatened by the Republican president. Brad Raffensperger was threatened, by the way, since I mentioned him earlier. When they called him in Georgia and said, I need you to find 11,000 votes. That wasn't the end of it because Raffensperger said, there's no finding votes and we're not going to try either. And Trump, remember, said, this is illegal. It's illegal for you not to look and find me 11,000 votes. You don't want to be in trouble. He threatened Raffensperger. He threatened his deputy. He threatened all sorts of Georgia officials who were saying no to him. We're going to charge you with criminal wrongdoing. Now, at that point, they probably were like, well, he doesn't have the time to actually bring those charges and make it stick. He's going to be out of office. If we hold, he'll be out of office in a matter of days. So I'm not too worried about him actually bringing criminal charges here. And then after that, surely he will never be president again. So we're probably in the clear. But this is not anything new either. Trump threatens Republicans all the time. It's no different, and I don't know whether it will be any more or less persuasive as well. But he does say, I don't know, go ask the Indiana delegation if they'd maybe be willing to co-sponsor impeachment charges or float a censure resolution even. They won't be, but you should ask. What will be funny is that one of the people you have to ask is Mike Pence's brother. But we know how he felt about them threatening to hang his brother. I don't care. It's not me. So, it might be a little awkward. All right, well, we're way behind on the outro music here. That's going to be difficult to fix. So we won't. We'll fix it in some other way. Sorry about that. All right, well, we'll take our break. It'll happen at some awkward times in the music, and so will our re-entry, but be prepared for that, unless you're listening to the podcast, and we fix it. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and I may even have welcomed you back with a blast of audio from something I've been trying but unsuccessful at queuing up to just be quiet for just a moment. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Senator, you're not recognized for that purpose. I've got something queued up that I need to play for you later on, and we lost track of where we were in the miscued music situation. And if we're successful in fixing this thing, and I really should just give instructions, don't worry about it, then you'll all be confused by this. You'll be even more confused if he ignores the instructions and fixes it. Okay, never mind. It's time to move on. I mentioned to you, where were we on our way out the door here? Now I have to find my place all over again. But I did... I've skipped through so many stories, and there's so many tabs open, I don't even really remember where I am at all, physically even, of what we were reading. Oh, yes, right. We were reading about Indiana and Trump's threats to withhold federal funding from Indiana, unless they agreed to his gerrymandering plan. And there's a lot of weird things about Indiana. And in looking for a write-up of what happened, I'm looking through Google here, and I haven't even gotten to the news tab yet. But when it brings up top stories about this, I've got CNN 6 hours ago publishing why Indiana is such a major unforced error for Trump. That is interesting. A little further back, 18 hours ago, in setback for Trump, Indiana lawmakers defeat redistricting plan. So that gives you an idea of what happened in the Senate side. They just said no. New York Times, key takeaways after Indiana lawmakers defy Trump's redistricting push. And then 1 hour ago, USA Today, Trump targets Indiana GOP Senate leader after defeat of redistricting plan. So that's sort of bringing you up to date on where we are currently. Joey Garrison writing this again for USA Today. We'll give you a quick look at what's happening here before jumping back out. President Donald Trump said he hopes the top Republican in the Indiana State Senate loses his next primary after Indiana rejected a Trump-backed congressional redistricting plan. Trump, speaking in the Oval Office, shouldn't be using it for that, of course, on December 11th, but that's the least of his crimes, called out by name Indiana Senate President pro tempore Rodric Bray, who was among 21 Republican senators who voted to defeat the redistricting bill in the GOP-controlled Senate. He'll probably lose his next primary, whenever that is, Trump said, because he did his homework and found out. I hope he does. This is him. I hope he does because he's done a tremendous disservice. Trump added that he will certainly support anybody that wants to go against him. Really? Certainly? What if he's being primaried from the left? I don't know. I'll support him anyway because I'm just angry. Who knows? Bray, who represents a district southwest of Indianapolis, is up for re-election in 2028. So, it's going to be a while. And Trump could be dead. He's an old guy. All right. Well, anyway, the Indiana Senate's 31-19 vote to kill the redistricting bill marks a major setback to Trump's mid-decade gerrymandering strategy for Republicans to hold on to control of the House in the 2026 elections, the midterm elections. The bill sought to create 2 new Republican districts, which would have given the GOP control of all 9 of the state's congressional districts. I thought it was 10, but apparently it's 9. Or maybe they're wrong about it. I don't know. But they wanted, obviously, control of all of them. Whether there are 9 districts or 10, they wanted them all. And that's ridiculous for a number of reasons. But by the way, all of this could end up being dummy manders. I mean, we say things like, well, it will give the Republicans control of all those districts. Not until they win them, it doesn't. But they may also be planning to cheat on who wins them. More on that later, perhaps. Nevertheless, Trump downplayed the results and tried to minimize his involvement. That's interesting. He lost, and that was something I noticed yesterday on social media as well. As soon as they lost and they went to him for comment, he said, well, it might be true that the Senate defeated it, but that's only because I wasn't really involved. I wasn't really particularly involved in this one, so it's not really a loss for me. I'm sad they did it, but I didn't really weigh in heavily with them. It's not my fault. Which is amazing because, of course, now the reports are he actually called the governor, the lieutenant governor, et cetera, and said, you're all going to lose federal funding unless you do things my way. And I hope you lose in your next primary. But I'm not very involved. Okay. Trump, by the way, leading up to the vote, Trump publicly tried to pressure Republicans to support the bill and even dispatched Vice President J.D. Vance to the Hoosier state. I believe he went twice. I wasn't working on it very hard. Would have been nice, Trump said, later adding, I wasn't very much involved, which obviously huge lie, but it's a day ending and why. Trump was unable to convince enough Republican Indiana senators to approve the redistricting plan, even though the GOP has a supermajority in the chamber. The 21 Republicans who voted against the bill outnumbered the 19 Republicans who voted for it. They really didn't want this to happen. Maybe because they understand it to be a dummy mander. Trump ignited a nationwide redistricting battle during the summer when he convinced Texas Republicans they urgently needed to draw a new congressional map. You know how this started. You know where we stand. The interesting part, I guess, at this point is if we jump back out to the top stories according to Google on this one, we have another important story, although, this one disappeared. I should have stayed on that page. But it was essentially someone else's report where in the Republican governor of Indiana, who's now Mike Brown, the one who spells it Braun, says, no, I support the idea, and I'm mad at the Indiana state senators who didn't do Trump's bidding. I'm siding with Trump, the sinking dictator wannabe in trouble for Epstein, pedophilia relationships, etc., blah, 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 and also selling out Ukraine to Russia and guilty of sedition and treason on January 6, 2021, blah, 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 blah. I'm on his side, not the side of my own Republican state party here in Indiana. So, that's a bit of an oddity. I don't know what, I guess I'm a little bit curious about the CNN piece, why Indiana is such a major unforced error. Oh, you know what? While I have them here, I should be Rats. How can I do this? Well, I'll go back and I got to open up the USA Today thing in another tab so that it doesn't disappear on me. I wonder if the more news tab would give me the governor. It is interesting. So the governor, so I guess they were both on that phone call, and the lieutenant governor says, yeah, Trump threatened our funding. But the governor says, yeah, but I'm on his side. That seems kind of weird. Where did that headline go? Dang. I wish that one was, I guess I should look and see, do this search again with the word governor in it, and maybe I'll get that headline again. There we are. From the Hill. All right. Indiana governor says he'll help primary Republicans who defied Trump on redistricting. I mean, I think you get the gist of the article there. I mean, he says what it means. He'll help do the primarying. It's kind of amazing in juxtaposition to the lieutenant governor's admission here that, hey, Trump threatened us. Trump targets Indiana. Is that the one we read before? Or is that a different one? Yeah, it's the one we read before. But now I really got to go back and see this other one here. But it's kind of amazing. Yeah, there we are. So both from the Hill. So the Hill has both the story that the lieutenant governor is saying we're being threatened, and that the governor is saying, well, I'm going to help. That is bizarre, to say the least. All right, so chew on that one over the weekend. Another thing I got to bring to your attention from over the weekend, or to read over the weekend, important. We'll never get through it even if we try, but a very lengthy piece in the New York Times, which was covered with an interview with one of the writers on that piece by Chris Hayes yesterday, and then widely disseminated, the clip from that disseminated on social media. But the story is of the Tate brothers, how a manosphere star, two of them really, I guess, but Andrew Tate is the big star here, but Tristan is his brother and accomplice, how a manosphere star accused of rape and trafficking, two, relatively bad things, high prominence in our consideration of, Trump world crimes, really, but how a manosphere star accused of rape and trafficking was freed. And it's a big story. It's long. We know about, but this is basically documenting the intervention of the Trump administration directly with authorities in Romania that resulted in the Tate brothers being freed and admitted back here into the United States, despite the fact that they are accused of the very crimes that Trump and Trump types keep saying that if you're non-white and you engage in, we want to make sure you're not allowed back into the country. That's the thing. Megan Twohey and Isabella Quai are the writers on this piece. It was Megan Twohey who was interviewed yesterday by Chris Hayes. I recommend taking a look at it. We may want to take a deeper look at it at some point as well. These guys are incredible in their they just stand outside of society entirely and are saying, to hell with it. Maybe we redefine the truth here. They're very Trumpy in that respect. And of course, Trump is assisting them in their pursuit of, we get to do whatever the hell we say we want, no matter how ridiculous it is, right in the face of the rest of us. It's really more than disturbing. Anyway, the thing I was working on queuing up for you, and now should bring to your attention, is Senator Chris Murphy. And it's a rather lengthy thing, but we'll consider it a submission to the show, 3 minutes almost in length, a video in which he is laying out, as he says, I need you to listen to this and share this story. It's how Trump is preparing to abandon Ukraine. This is much we understood to be the case, in exchange for Russian money for his billionaire friends. And of course, he's one of his own best billionaire friends. If It could be the greatest corruption of American foreign policy in our history. Russia gets Ukraine. Trump's friends get rich. Just another angle on a story that's been continuing since 2018-19 when he was president the first time and was agreeing to sell them out. But by the way, it's been a long, strange trip, I guess you could say. I'm just sort of imagining it. Have we forgotten along the way that standing by his side and in helping him in doing this, but maybe unwittingly in terms of the part where Ukraine gets sold out to Russia, but maybe not, because the lines between Russian interests and Ukrainian interests in some of these cases is pretty blurry in the minds of some people. But we remember that Lev Parnas, who's now like actively anti-Trump and whose son is actively anti-Trump as well, was involved in the initial architecture of this Trump world approach to Ukraine. And they didn't seem too upset about the possibility of selling out Ukraine to Russia at that point, but now they are. Anyway, Chris Murphy is concerned about something completely different, and I just thought I would play another angle on this thing, and I thought I'd play his warning for you.
Right now, the most serious corruption of American
I'm going to have to
policy.
Pause this thing, and I guess I can't raise the volume while it's playing, which is too bad. A real bug in this thing. But okay.
Right now, the most serious corruption of American foreign policy ever is being talked about inside the Trump administration. It's being described as a peace plan to end the Russian war in Ukraine. But if you look at the details, it has nothing to do with peace. It is a business deal to make the people around Donald Trump rich. It's just corruption through and through. Let me tell you the story. According to the Wall Street Journal, last month, Vladimir Putin sent the head of his sovereign wealth fund to negotiate an end to the Ukraine war with Steve Witkoff, who is one of Trump's billionaire buddies, also one of his national security advisors. They met in Miami Beach. Jared Kushner was there too. Putin didn't send his foreign minister, and this is important. He sent his business deals guy, the guy who controls the billions of money that are produced by Russia's oil operations. Why do you do that? Because he knows that the way you get Trump's people to agree to sell out Ukraine is to offer up a deal to make Trump's billionaire friends even richer. Here's some of the examples. ExxonMobil right now is in secret discussions with Rosneft, that's Russia's largest state energy company, about a massive gas project in Russia's Far East, something that can only happen if the war is over and sanctions on the company are lifted. Rich Trump donors are right now trying to get in on the action as well. One donor just recently paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to a lobbyist that's really close to Trump's inner circle to try to buy the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. That's a Russian gas pipeline. Once again, something that is only possible for these investors to get rich on if the war is over and the U.S. lifts its sanctions. Another close Trump associate is in talks about acquiring a stake in a Russian Arctic gas project. So that's what Trump's billionaire friends get. But what does Ukraine get? Nothing. Nothing. This deal sells out Ukraine. In fact, this deal would require Ukraine to give to Russia territory that Russia doesn't even currently control. It provides amnesty for all of the war crimes that Putin has committed. It creates no real security guarantees for Ukraine moving forward. This peace deal is a disaster for Ukraine. But it frankly shows how savvy Vladimir Putin is. He knows the way to get to Donald Trump and Steve Witkoff. Pay them off. Pay their friends off. Do favors for their billionaire crowd. And if you do that, then they're prepared to sell out Ukrainian security, European security, and American national security. This is a terrible deal for Ukraine, but it's a great deal for Trump and Witkoff's billionaire buddies.
All right now, I've got to get this thing now to stop, but okay. Yeah, there are a few places I want to interrupt. He was very smart to have included a musical bed on this, not only for auditory interest in all this and to add that sense of tension, but it also made it more difficult to interrupt him. I clearly could have done it, but it would be that much more abrupt for me to interrupt and comment along the way. But yeah, I think he makes a very good point here. I mean, we sort of looked past it just in terms of, oh, well, that's Trump, in terms of why is the peace deal being negotiated by these people who have no business doing? Why is Witkoff his envoy? All right. it's a dumb reason, but he is his envoy. But why is Jared Kushner involved in this? He's not even in government, even though they could have faked that up for him again, too. Why is he involved? And of course, why is the contact on the Russian side the sovereign wealth fund guy as opposed to the foreign minister? It's a good question, and you might dismiss it by just saying, well, that's Trump being Trump. And it is, but it's largely because this is going to, we don't really care about the substantive issues of war and peace as between these two countries. What we care about is we need to be able to convince America and the legal system and Congress that it's okay to lift sanctions so that my friends can make money off of the investments that they made and kick it back to me. And we can only convince people that the sanctions are lifted if we can convince them that the war is over. And in order to do that, we certainly have to adopt some kind of a peace plan, right? Everybody knows that has to happen before a war ends. It doesn't matter that there be anything traditional in the peace plan. Just put together a thing that says plan. And if that passes muster, then great. And we can lift the sanctions and we can all make money. And I guess, again, at this point, I don't know whether it's fair to tar him with this anymore because he may not actually be in a position to reap this reward any longer for various reasons. But I do remind you that Lev Parnas and what was his name? Was it Furman, or was he the Sausage King of Chicago? I can't remember anymore. Anyway, but their initial interest in working, I remember what they were doing. They were working with Rudy Giuliani and others to try to facilitate Giuliani's quest to find somebody in Ukraine who would say that Biden, both Hunter and Joe, were involved in corrupt practices in Ukraine, and so therefore you shouldn't be voting for them, and frame them up, and which is also amazing in light of what did Trump just do the other day? Oh, right, freeing the ex-president of Honduras, saying, oh, well, Biden, he set him up, which of course is what he was trying to do with Biden in Ukraine the whole time. But anyway, Lev Parnas and his partner were helping Giuliani facilitate the quote-unquote discovery of this quote-unquote evidence against the Bidens. And their side deal that they thought they would make $1 billion with was exporting liquid natural gas from Ukraine, which would, of course, under a peace deal, fall very likely into Russian hands, and they could parcel out the deals to whoever they wanted and create new billionaires that way. And I think Lev Parnas and his partner were originally interested in having that happen. Now, that backfired and other things intervened along the way, and Trump tried throwing him under the bus, and he ended up in legal trouble. So maybe now he's angry, but maybe now he could get pardoned from all of that, but actually he never... I don't know if he ever actually faced legal jeopardy of anything serious, but it may have been because he was cooperating. I don't know. So we should check back into his situation. But I just found that interesting that, once again, an energy deal, as they would call it in the Trump administration now, as opposed to just straight up corruption and payoff, was at the heart of what drove Lev Parnas at that point to be a Trump operative. He's not one now, but he's one of many who have, been forced to leave the circle. So no surprise there. By the way, one of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention about the story about Andrew Tate and his brother and the Trump administration intervention on his behalf, and it didn't really feature a great deal in the Chris Hayes interview, but it was mentioned. And one of the things that I saw that prompted me to open up the story in the first place was that some of the contacts inside Trump world that drove the administration to intervene in the Tate's behalf was personal relationships between members of the Trump family and the Tates, which is interesting and disturbing. I'm like, I guess if you thought you were going to get an honest answer out of Ivanka, you might have asked her, like, well, what do you think about this? You're the only woman he listens to. Do you think he should be intervening on Tate's behalf? She's got nothing to do. I don't want to talk to him about it. But her older brother, Don Jr., is very much connected to Tate. And we could come to expect that. He is an old perv himself, just like Dad, and maybe a little bit too interested in exports from Colombia and whatever else. But, and this should also surprise no one, but it will disappoint initially. I mean, not disappoint, but make you just say, oh, what a tragedy on behalf of the world. Not so much a tragedy for the person himself, because he was probably doomed, but Baron Trump is also very much interested, and it makes sense. He's a listener. He's into the Tate podcasts and the Tate lifestyle. He's directly in the path of the demographic targeting, right? This is exactly how Tate makes his inroads, and lo and behold, the Trumpiest teenager, late teen, early 20s kid in the world is in fact, soaking in Tate world propaganda as well. Oh, Dad, you should let him out. He's really totally cool. And there you have it. It seems a little weird, but it's true. Okay. Let's see. I had another idea very quickly about other things that I might need to enter onto the record before we head out of here for the weekend. But now I got to scroll and try to find it again and remind myself, because there are so many things happening that I find myself constantly distracted about it. All right, it's not this, it's not this, it's not that. Oh, I did want to perhaps return at some point to the strange story of the Nobel laureate from Venezuela, Maria Corina Machado, but that I may also have to recommend to you for reading over the weekend. Yeah, here we go. Here's another thing I won't be able to get all the way through, but I thought I should read in light of the things that we've discussed already today. This flows a little better, even though I do feel like I want to go back and read about Machado. This one recommended to me not that long ago, I think, via email, and I wish I had the time on my hands to point to who it was who sent it to me. One of many who have no doubt seen it, and I had to say, yeah, we've definitely discussed things. It may have been Scott even, now that I think about it. I'm not sure. I'm sorry I didn't save that alongside the story, but this will reveal nothing new per se, but it's related to Indiana in a way. So I thought I would add this one. Steve Israel, former congressman, writing on December 8th in the New Republic, the simple legal way Trump could steal the midterms, and it's not just redistricting. A little-known section of the Constitution may hold the key to overturning Democratic wins in 2026. Like I said, we haven't discussed this one directly, but it's definitely come up before. I've mentioned it before. I've outlined similar plans on the Senate side. This is just sort of doing the same thing on the House side. But remember, we mentioned earlier in the show today, not with this in mind, but we did mention it, that each camera, if you will, of the Congress is responsible for its own determinations about who is and isn't elected to that body, and they have that prerogative and they can use it. And basically, long story short, we have to, because we're going to run out of time here. Could the House Republicans, seeing that they've lost the elections and lost control of the House of Representatives, do anything to thwart it? And the answer is yes, of course. They could, in convening the existing Congress at the time, and the gavel still being in their hands before swearing in new membership, acknowledging a Democratic majority and handing over, having a vote for the speakership and then handing it over to Hakeem Jeffries or whoever. And could they just say, actually, we were just thinking that maybe all or some of the Democrats elected to this new majority aren't elected to this new majority. And in fact, we refused to seat them. And all of the members assembled here who purport to still be members of the House can just say, we dispute this election and we set it aside. I say it's related to Indiana because, of course, this happened in the bloody 8th, the Indiana 8th district. Several times they've disputed the elections there. And there is, in fact, a history in which, if you read it objectively, the House Democratic majority set aside what looked, for all intents and purposes, to be the election of a Republican member of Congress there, and instead awarded the seat to a Democrat. And you better believe that there will be Republicans who will point to that in the future. This happened back in the 80s, but they'll point to it anyway. And some of the cases probably even possibly before current members of the House were born. But he outlines it here. Every 2 years between 2001 and 2015, I'd begin my term in Congress with the official swearing-in ceremony on the House floor. Once again, the swearing-in ceremony, actually important. I'd raise my right hand, proclaim my oath to the Constitution. Republicans would do that and lie. And I'd take a seat. I'd always assumed that the seat was bestowed to me by a majority of the voters in my Long Island district. Turns out I was wrong. The very Constitution I'd promised to protect and defend has an obscure clause that could have invalidated my election. I guess if you're brazen enough, you can invalidate anything. The simple language tucked into Article 1, Section 5 might be a mechanism for Donald Trump and his congressional acolytes to maintain their House majority after the 2026 midterm elections, even if it's clear the Democrats have flipped the House. It'd be craven, but shockingly constitutional, and it would be hard for courts to reverse. The possible hijacking of the Democratic majority would rest on these words: each House shall be the judge of the elections, returns, and qualifications of its own members, and a majority of each shall constitute a quorum to do business. More plainly, voters may believe they are choosing their preferred representative, that once they see their district's race called on election night, they can sleep peacefully in the knowledge that the winner will be sworn in. Ultimately, the final arbiter of those elections is the Speaker of the House, and if an election is close, perhaps even beset by accusations of fraud, let's say, then the Speaker has enough constitutional leeway to override election results. You should read it. Maybe we'll discuss it a little bit next week. There's a hitch to it. One hitch being, well, who shows up on January 6th to execute this, not this president for fomenting another insurrection, but rather to execute this plan? And the answer is, well, they would have to bring the Republican losers in and have the clerk admit them to the floor so that they could vote in this operation to overturn the elections.
From networksradio.com.
Would they do it? It'd be brazen.
You've been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
Anyway, it was certainly a huge long shot and certainly hugely disruptive, but you need to consider it in light of the fact that they are having quote-unquote deportation judges fake the record in the Abrego Garcia case. And the fact that they forged electoral college votes in the past. I think it's within their means. They could probably do it. Stay tuned for Justice next. See you next week.